Welcome everyone, I'm here in Chongqing with my good friend Alex from Reporterfy Media. I've been hanging around in the city for a while. Some of you may have seen him towards the end of my video, and I thought we should have a quick chat before I head back. I'm heading back soon, so we're gonna have to wrap this up pretty quickly, but we'll at least get something out there, and we'll always have next time. So what we're gonna talk about is we're just gonna talk a little bit about your background, your history, how you got into kind of looking at media a little bit differently, and we'll talk a little bit about Ukraine also. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on there. So for starters, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are, and then just go right into kind of that, you know, those epiphany moments for you where you started to say, there's something going on here with the media.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a Canadian, and I moved to Europe when I was around 26 years old, 26 and a half, something like that. And, you know, coming to Europe as a Canadian is a real eye-opener. You see so many different cultures and many different countries. And I arrived before the European Union was, you know, brought into the full level that it is now. So I was learning a lot, you know, in my first couple of years on how to feel comfortable as a Canadian living in Europe. And I lived in Monaco, and it's quite an exclusive place. And during my travels in Monaco, I didn't realize how close I was to a lot of these places that I was, you know, researching, you know, at a younger year, growing up. Let me give you an example. So my father died not long after me being in Monaco, and he served in the Navy. My grandfather died in the Second World War. He was a Navy man as well. My dad was a signalman, you know, where they flash those, the codes. I knew Morse code very early. And I did win some things at school with them when they were ringing the bells. Maybe the principal thought, this guy's cheating, but no, I could understand Morse code. But my father, I remember my father briefly telling me, coming home with a new television. And I said, Dad, why do we need a new TV? And he says, it's the thing to do when you know that news coverage is going to be heavy on wars. And I was quite confused because, you know, I was always interested. When I was going to school, I would follow the Iraq War. You know, CNN did a fantastic job. I think that's almost what built that network, is their coverage of that war. So I was always fascinated to kind of follow some geopolitical things. And then when it got to that point, you had to, because that was the media. Everybody was covering it. Well, at this time, it was the time around where Bill Clinton had a little bit of an issue. Articles of impeachment were being brought forward. It was getting pretty heavy. And you could see the support wavering back and forth. Even some people in his own party were like, oh, we could actually see the first president of the United States be impeached. And then, out of nowhere, Yugoslavia came up on the news. And it went from, there's an issue, there's a big issue, full-blown NATO-led war.
Now, your dad bought the TV before the Yugoslavia stuff happened, but after the Bill Clinton stuff happened.
Well, it all kind of was going around the same time. Like these article impeachments, they were going to the Senate was bringing it back. Was the House going to do it? And then, you know, the Secretary of State was starting to wind up things in the U.S. And Secretary of State would it have been Madeleine Albright back then? Yeah, anyway, we'll get to that. But during that phase, my father and I were watching this going, you know, from relatively non-existent issue to full-blown NATO. Like it went on. And this war went on for, I believe it was 78 days. And I want the viewers, if they can, to go back and actually look at how much destruction happened during this war. It's astronomical on how many bombs were dropped in this country during that NATO-led, I guess, I don't even know what to even call it. Because you can't even really call it a war, because it was NATO that came in. And you know, if you have some questions about it, I'm quite familiar with the situation, what NATO was doing, but I'm still trying to backtrack on why it was relevant to bring all these countries into Yugoslavia at that time and really, you know, blast it into smithereens is what they've done.
Yeah, now I've heard a lot of kind of people who tend to justify Western wars talk about what the justifications were for that. I don't know the nuances of that enough to kind of get into that. And maybe we're, because we want to get over to Ukraine, we're not going to get into that. But what was interesting to me, because we've had many, drinks, coffee, beer together, and what was really interesting to me was your story about how the results of that kind of manifested itself when you went for a visit as a Canadian, and the interaction you had that was kind of really unexpected from the perspective of a Canadian.
Yeah.
You're always saying when Canadians travel abroad, we feel pretty welcome.
Yeah.
I was telling you before that the many Americans before, I was told that when they were traveling through Europe or these different places, they didn't want to be mistaken as an American. They'd put a Canadian flag on their backpack. So you tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah. I mean, initially my understanding and still to this day, I go back and I try to review the notes that happened on this 78-day aerial bombardment is what it was. And I really try, and every year, Daniel, piece by piece, a little bit more is being released and more documentations come out on this area. And it confuses me more. And that's why I'm trying to say to the viewers that I don't think we still have the complete story on what's happened in that area. So I'm of the mind that if I'm going to get the complete story, if I'm going to try to understand a region, I'm going to get a flight, I'm going to book it, I'm going to go there. I'm going to meet the locals. These feet are going to be on the ground. I'm going to visit as many facilities that I can, whether they're local support groups or my grandfather was a member of the Legion, Canadian Legion, and if you ever want to understand how veterans are, go in, be a visitor at the Legion, sit down, talk to some of these guys, talk about what's happened, talk about what potentially they feel is current threats or even future threats. You'll get all types of kind of information, and as well as you'll get some pretty interesting old war stories.
Yeah.
Mostly in the Canadian Legions, it's a place for veterans to kind of support each other and maybe have a drink or talk. Have you ever been into one of these?
I had one of my friends want to invite me into one. It's kind of an interesting story. It was not really a main city area, so that particular area, it was a little bit more racist in town, and so my I call him a friend. I got really close to him. He was always kind of a racist himself, and I'm not, And so he said to me one day, he says, I got to take you down to the Legion one day. And I said, yeah, that'd be cool. He said, oh, wait, shoot, no, that's not going to be a good idea. So, I'm sure the ones in the cities are fine, but there are some out in small town Ontario.
Yeah, I mean, most of the ones I've been to they're not glamorous locations. I mean, but
it's usually a bunch of guys going drinking together, at least this one. So.
And, it's a great place to actually just be a fly on the wall.
Yeah, it sounds like him.
So I decided that I needed to get to, we call it Serbia now. Before it was Yugoslavia. And I booked a flight with a friend of mine. He was an Irish guy. And I always liked this. I've always had it in my mind where my dad, he set this ball rolling with me about this war. He predicted that there was going to be a war there. America was going to lead, which they have on many. And I always remember that was the moment where I said, how is my dad predicting that this is going to unravel so fast? And it did. It unraveled really fast. And I thought, wow, okay, this is interesting. And that's always stuck in my mind where now, you could see the drums are being beat, building on certain areas in the world. You could almost predict the media is going to lead that in there. Now, is that the media working with governments? I don't know. Is that the government sending a signal to the media to tell the story, to see the response? There's many different elements on.
Yeah, there's a question that was asked by, I have some tweets here that I wanted to share with you later, but Caitlin Johnston, one of my favorite journalists, she said, what is the functional difference between a state media broadcaster uncritically reporting what government tells them to report and a Western news media outlet uncritically reporting a scoop that was fed to them by government officials? Because ultimately, that's what happens a lot of the times. They have, Pentagon kind of sources who feed them what they want or leak certain documents or, but yeah, it's a good question.
So I kept focusing on this, and you and I have talked about this Yugoslavian thing many a times, and I keep bringing it up because it's almost like it's a blueprint on what I've been seeing on all these wars building up to the last couple of years, or even, you know, throughout the 2000 to 2010 to 2010 to 2022, all these wars and conflicts. It's like a blueprint. So I decided to travel down there, and I got to tell you, I mean, we arrived at the airport. It was about 8:30 at night. And there's one thing that I do every time I arrive at airports is I look at the arrivals. It's just the thing. I want to see what other flights, direct flights, are coming into the city in case, you know, I want to come back and visit. Maybe it's got direct flights to this and that. And I noticed that there was only, after about 8 p.m., there's only 2 flights. And this city was the size of Vancouver, Canada. And for people that don't know the size, it's a couple of million. And I thought, wow, okay, this city got knocked out. It got knocked out on the travel map. It got, you know, when I told my friends I was going to Belgrade, they're like, you're going where? Wasn't that place just leveled a while ago? And it's like, yeah. So we got to the place, and it's actually quite a lovely city. And I felt pretty safe there. And I dropped my bags off at the hotel, and I went down they have a common area, kind of like a city center where you go to have drinks. And it was a nice warm evening out, and you trust me, when you're walking down the streets there, you knew that the country had conflicts.
Right.
You could see, you know, the buildings. Some of the buildings were, you know, some of the windows still out. Some didn't rebuild. Some didn't. Some bridges knocked out. It's visible. The scars are visible. So my friend and I, we were walking down. We were going to have a drink, and it's very common in, you know, these countries. You know, like former Yugoslavian countries or Eastern European countries at the time, to, you know, get a bottle, sit outside, whether it's a bottle of wine or a bottle of vodka, whatever your flavor is, and to kind of kick back. It's kind of bottle service. I don't know. I think they have it in Canada, but they definitely have it in that part of the world. So we walked up to the front of this, we'll call it a little lounge, and I said, okay, my friend and I, Jono, we'd like to sit down, and can you get us a table? And she says, I'm sorry, you're not coming in. And I thought, okay, is it because I don't have a reservation or something like that? And I thought it was a joke or a TV show. Maybe it was a TV reality show going on, but she was quite serious. She says, she says, are you American? And I said, no.
You're safe.
Yeah, I'm safe. I thought, Canadian, I'm in there. Nothing against America, everybody. I'm just saying that was a question asked to me. And I responded, initially thought about your backpack flag story. So I said, no, I'm Canadian. And she looked me in the eye and she says, you know, well, that's even worse. And once again, I still thought it was a joke. And I said, you know, can I talk to the manager? And she says, no, you're not coming in. I'm like, okay. And I pondered around. I kept going back and forth. And normally I would just walk away and go back, but this was bugging me. You know, I'm in this country. I'm trying to get to the bottom of things. And the Serbian people are very, very nice people. And I got to remember that this isn't me going in 2022. This is me going back many, many years ago, decades ago, to a zone where the whole world was there, okay? Or the whole world was bombing the place. And you have to understand that this was probably one of the best pieces of travel education that I've ever had. Mm-hmm. And she says, listen, I'll make you a deal. I said, okay. And I thought, all right. And she wasn't rude, she was polite. She says, if you walk 300 meters behind you, you can see there's a well lit up from the stairs here. You walk 300 meters, you have a look. If you're okay with that, you come back around and I'll give you the best table in the place. So again, I continue to think that I was just it was the humor. So I said, my friend, let's go for a walk. So we went for a walk, and it was, 300 meters. It's not very far. And I got to the street. It was during the night. It wasn't a dangerous area or anything like that. And I turned to my left, and I was with my friend, and I saw a building lit up, a smashed up, blown up building with our Canadian flag hanging from it with a black question mark. Why Canada? And it's a dulling effect, and you get it in your stomach and you just go, ooh. what's our flag doing there on a bombed out, smashed up, blown up building? I couldn't really comprehend it, but then I started to understand that, we're a NATO country, trying to put the pieces together, but I had to go back to my hotel, and I thought, do I get out of this city? What the hell, all right? So we get back to the hotel, and I'm sitting at the bar trying to calm down what I've just seen. And trust me, if you see your flag in another country,
in
like
that context,
in that context, with a you might see buildings that maybe have a broken window, but when you see a building that's pretty much leveled, that's just a skeleton of itself, with probably the biggest Canadian flag you've ever seen. So sitting at the bar, the bartender came over and he says, "Hey, you look like you've seen a ghost," and he's probably right. He was a very kind guy, big Serbian guy, most of them are. And I said, "Yeah, I just saw my flag hanging from the building." He says, "That's one of our military buildings that was bombed during the war." And he says, "You're Canadian?" I said, "Yeah, I'm Canadian." And he says, you have fast jets. I worked the anti-aircraft from some of the buildings throughout the city here." He says, "Yeah, those jets are fast." He says, "They were mostly responsible. They flew most of the missions that leveled this country and this city."
That's amazing when you think about it. You're sitting down at this bar and he's having a friendly conversation with you, and he's the guy that was firing at your country people flying overhead. Just a few years before, he's trying to shoot down other Canadians who are in jets. And now he's here at the bar having a chat with you. That's really something.
And I gotta tell you that moment that happened, he says, "Well, isn't it interesting how you and I can have a chat?" And he invited me to his house the next following day. And I went to his house. I saw how his family lived, and he was talking about the stories. And this experience that I got lasted me a lifetime, because I didn't really understand. You see a lot of this on TV, you come pretty numb to it. You're told one story, like, "Oh, everything's fine. The bad guy's out, the good guys are in, everything's going to be fine." There's both sides to everything. There's casualties on both sides. Doesn't matter what war you're in. And meeting his wife and his child, and sitting at their table, and I just felt responsible.
Right.
I don't know how to, even though I wasn't in that war, I just felt responsible.
But I guess you also felt like there was a whole side of the story that you weren't given a chance to see. And it's really interesting, because now we think, okay, we're coming up to the internet age. Now all of the information is available. You don't have to do what you used to do, go on your feet and visit these places. But it almost is like it's more important now than ever, because even though we have this internet, people are still they're really easy to control and to kind of push into certain narratives. And then people act as foot soldiers to protect those narratives. I mean, it's a fascination I have to observe this online. And if you're not going to go there yourself, at least listen to both sides. And, obviously that ability is being taken away in the West by taking RT shows off of the air, because they call it government propaganda or whatever it is, removing people who are sympathetic towards Russia's position. It's like, just, listen to them and make up your mind for yourself. I remember watching this show where this guy, he's not, he's very critical of Israel. And in the interview, he was saying, I'm critical of Israel, but the first thing I do every morning I wake up is I read the pro-Israel newspapers. I want to see, what do they have to say about this? What are they saying about this? And then he kind of compares everything and understand, but that seemed to have sparked a whole movement for you where you do this on a regular basis. Because I remember I was talking to you, like, my wake-up moment was Hong Kong, when I realized what was happening in Hong Kong, what was being said by the media, were two very, very different things. And there was a whole segment of society that was being totally ignored and silenced, and even removed off of Twitter. During that time, I had many, they were called bots, they were removed, but I knew these were real people. I have direct conversations with them. And then I was surprised to find out that you even went to Hong Kong when that was going on.
Yeah, I mean, once again, that Yugoslavian war, it just, when you travel to these countries, you start to say, wait a second, that's not right. I was told something else.
Right.
And you start to doubt a lot of things. And then you start going back and saying, well, if this wasn't, and I'm not saying that everything the media was saying was wrong, but they missed out a lot of big parts here and a lot of other parts that could give a different opinion on something. I'll give you an example. Spending that time there in Yugoslavia and then traveling around to all the other countries that were now of the former Yugoslavia, Bosnia-Herzegovina. I went down to Kosovo. I went to Montenegro. I went to all of these, Croatia. And you were getting all different bits of information about what really happened. And it was nothing like what was told. And I went back to the stories and I watched old BBC footage and I watched old CNN footage and I watched old CBC footage. I watched it all, hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of it. And said, nope, that didn't go down that way. Nope, there's no way that went down there. There's even one report like, the West will lead the rebuilding of Yugoslavia. Never happened.
Right.
Bridges are still leveled in that country.
They said this is the same thing what they're going to do to Libya. They're going to turn it into a democracy. So no, I mean it's really a pity because this is what you would hope that journalists were doing.
Yeah.
But they're going there and they're spinning a story based on their or their corporation's ideologies.
Well, they're not really going there, because when you say that a journalist is going to go to a location, they're going to go, "Hi, my name is so and so, and I'm standing here in Germany, and I'm talking about the Ukraine."
Yeah.
This old embedded reporters, these journalists that go in there, put on the bulletproof vests, they get into the action. That's hard to find now.
But the problem is even when that does happen, a lot of them are going in with an ideological standpoint to begin with. They've got their the way that they want to spin it, or they at least know what they've got to say in order to continue to get airtime. I mean, when we had people who were opposing the Iraq war, they were losing their jobs. They were being fired off of MSNBC and things like that. So I think people either subconsciously know that this is the way I've got to present this, or I'm not going to advance in my career. Maybe worse, I'll lose my job. Or, as Noam Chomsky said once in an interview to a BBC reporter who said, "How do you know I'm self-censoring?" And Noam replied, "Well, I don't think you're self-censoring. I think you believe everything that you're saying. Just the problem is if you believed something else, you wouldn't be sitting where you're sitting." There's different ways to mold the narrative how you want. But, the interesting thing is that a lot of people do make up their mind based on mainstream media.
Yeah, you're right.
And if you're not able to do what you're doing, going in, walking around, talking to people themselves, that's a difficult thing for a lot of people to do, especially on a regular basis. At least listen to both sides and then make up your mind. But they're just being fed something, and we'll get into the media aspect in a sec more. But and that's continued with you, right? You said what did you do when you went to Hong Kong?
Yeah, I mean, here's the funny thing is that when I went to Hong Kong, I was looking at trying to reach out to the media outlets to get. Do I sign up? Remember, this is new to me. I'm thinking, how am I going to do this? I really want to go find this story. And at the time I was living in Thailand. We moved around Thailand around 2015, 2016. So I was in Southeast Asia. I thought, Hong Kong, let's go. I need to find the story. And trust me, I was in many other places even before this, trying to get to the bottom of where the media was going with it. So with Hong Kong, I went and I started to write some media outlets. And one media outlet called Apple Daily.
Oh boy, yeah.
Reached out to me and said that I needed to sign up with them in order for them to facilitate me with a press pass. And I thought that was strange because I just put on a forum. It was a forum. How do I get a press pass, or as an independent journalist?
Where did you fill that in?
I didn't. It was more on So let's say they had a Reddit. They had a Reddit.
Okay.
They had a Reddit channel.
And they were trying to push you through Apple Daily.
Absolutely.
Oh my God. Okay, yeah.
All arrows were pointing to Apple Daily.
That's one of the most anti-China kind of.
I had no ways around it. Oh, you need to do this. You need to fill this. Send your identifications and all that. So I just, I spoke with my wife. I went down to the local hardware store, got a high-res jacket, got a printed yellow press cap, got on the airplane, flew into Hong Kong, started walking down the street. I do have some footage of it.
You weren't releasing it on your channel though or anything, were you? Or?
Did I release it on my channel? I was doing some Twitter things. I was
Okay,
sending
yeah,
out
yeah.
some Twitter. And at that time, my channel really wasn't, it was kind of irrelevant. But that was once
Yeah.
again the firing moment where I went back to Thailand after that and said, guys, this story that we're watching unfold in Hong Kong is not the same as what I'm seeing on.
I don't know. I don't know if you realize how dangerous what you did was, because Toby Gu, Canadian, blogger or whatever, he came to Hong Kong to find the story of police brutality. He wanted to film police brutality and release it. And what he ended up finding was protesters beating ordinary civilians, like brutally beating them. And he's like, "Holy crap!" And then when he posted it, they started looking for him. They said, find this guy. He was under attack. He was hiding in his hotel room. And then Tom Grundy, the president of Hong Kong Free Press, while this guy was hiding in his hotel saying he's scared, there's people coming after him, he's getting death threats, posted his picture and said, find this guy and confront him. He's not a real journalist. Because he, for the first time that none of these other journalists wanted to do, actually covered the protester violence, which was extreme. To this day, most people don't even realize that a man was lit on fire by these protesters. Another man was killed with a brick, a street cleaner.
Yeah, I remember these events. Now,
yeah.
I'm going to add to that. I knew it was dangerous.
Okay.
But this came with some of the experience that I'm going to tell you how I gained this experience to prepare my mind even for Hong Kong.
Your Ukrainian stuff came before that, right?
Exactly. So I had, once again, gone to the former Yugoslavia, we'll call it Belgrade. Okay, it's Belgrade now, but I started to really get into reading a lot of online crowdfunded journalists, independent journalists. And when I mean independent, I mean not accredited to any news company or funded by any NGOs or anything like that. And I started to come across a few guys, and one guy really stuck out to me. It was called this Patrick Lancaster. Okay, and I thought, wow, this guy's interesting. And at that time, around 2014, there was another movement going on in Ukraine. There's been lots of these. And this was really starting to heat up down in that region. And once again, the drumbeat started going. I thought, wow, this is interesting. Maybe I should go out and get a new television, because this is going to get interesting. Thinking of what my dad was telling me. And sure enough, Yanukovych was on a flight out of Ukraine. A new government was thrown in there. Don't remember seeing that election on that government, but the new government came in. I believe they were passing laws to get Russian language out. Crimea was being told, leave it alone. It's a red line, but
So for all intents and purposes, that could have been already, using the standard definition that they use in Xinjiang, saying that they're eliminating the Uyghur language, which they're not. You go there, it's everywhere. That's what they were actually trying to do. They would be, according to the West's definition, they were trying to cultural genocide is what they used the word. They were trying to culturally genocide the Russian-speaking Ukrainians in the East at that point.
Yeah, I want to add some more context to that, to what that really means, because there's still lots of confusion going on, still to this day, what's happened in that region. And if you understand what happened there, is that there were part of those regions that were ethnic Russians. We see that throughout other nationalities around the world. We have in Canada, we have French Canadians.
Yeah.
And our French Canadians weren't happy at one point in the country, and they put it to a referendum that was very close. If that ever got to a conflict, would we use our Canadian military against Canadians?
Yeah, start bombing Quebec.
Right.
They started bombing those areas, right? But even back
then. I was following this, and I was really amazed at how well funded these protesters were in the city center of Kiev. They managed to sit there for months and months and months, heavily financed. Someone financed them. There was embarrassing leaked calls coming out of...
Victoria Nuland, basically saying, this is our guy. I mean, they were deep into this. F the EU. That's a really important, so with your Quebec, sorry to stop you for a second, but with your Quebec example, to really appreciate the gravity of that. You'd have to imagine if that during the Quebec referendum, you had Russian or Chinese officials with their hands in the pot also, and saying things like, "Oh, this is our guy. This is the guy we want to lead Quebec after they separate from Canada." I mean, it would be completely. People would understand what's wrong with it at that point.
It wouldn't take much. I mean, if there was, we use Quebec because we're Canadians here, so we're using kind of a situation where, if the Americans came in and tried to mix something up and say, we got our right guy to put in Montreal to handle all this kind of stuff, let's get out the sitting prime minister, we've got it sorted out. Well, who would come to the rescue of French Canadians?
Maybe France.
It'd be France, probably France. So the situation here was, you had some people, we'll call them ethnic Russians, but Ukrainian nationalities, concerned that something wasn't very comfortable in their country.
They've got a new leader they didn't elect in the 2014.
New leader they didn't elect.
They're anti-Russian.
The language was being pushed out as well. And at that time, the fighting really wasn't getting, totally severe. But then it was like a powder keg. Crimea kind of went off into the distance quietly, and they, without much conflict down there. There was some conflict, but not as much as in these other regions. But then you got to the eastern part of Ukraine. And this is where all hell was breaking loose.
Right.
And I started following this guy. And once again, this
is when he had like no followers. He's pretty big now.
He's big now. I kept trying to say, well, what's going on that other side? Why is there skirmishes? I'm always of that, I need to get that other side. And what the viewers should do, once again, as you were saying, take your information here, and come up with it. Well, I was only getting this information. Every time I was trying to get the Donbass area information, blank. Or it was a cut and paste from AP. Another journalist cut and pasted it, modified it a little bit. Same story.
All of the things that people are caring about right now, shelling of civilian casualties, bombardments on civilian areas, they were already going on, but nobody cared about it back then. Nobody was covering it.
Nobody was covering it, Daniel. Yeah. Nobody was covering it. And at that time, you have to look for this stuff.
Right.
It's not going to be given to you on a platter like these other mainstream medias. Trust me, I had trust in a lot of media. I had this Yugoslavian moment where the media, I stopped trusting it. And I had to continue to search to find out the truth.
Right.
Now, do I get my media from this side? Do I get my media from that side? And once again, in this Donetsk People's Republic area, we were getting no media. And I found this one YouTube channel of this guy who is no one. And the videos that he was putting up on this channel, Daniel, it reminded me of the real journalism that we all thirst and want to get to the story, to get unfilter, tell it. And to me, it was like, wow. It was like
Is it anything like what he's posting now?
Oh yeah, it was.
Because what he's posting now is just he's sitting down, he's ducked down, and there's literally snipers shooting at his head, and his eyes are like this. He knows that he could be hit at any moment.
Yeah.
The other troops are saying, stay down, don't get up, Patrick. Yeah. He's walking through these areas with bodies. Well, actually, some of the videos I saw with civilian deaths and bodies in the streets was before the Russian invasion.
Yeah, and let me add to that then. So around 2015, he was in there before, and just to give you a little bit of background on Patrick Lancaster served in the Navy. He moved over to this region before the war even started, married a local girl, had a couple of local kids there, and didn't have a journalistic background, and picked up his camera one day and said, I got to tell this story because nobody else is telling this story. And the video footage that came out, some of kind of like the stuff, he went right to the front line. He watched the disintegration of a $500 million airport get blown up by the Ukrainian army. Yeah. It wasn't just that. Not weeks after that, water gets shut off. Not weeks after that, electricity gets shut off. The bank machines get set off. There's a problem when Western Union gets kicked out of the country or gets shut down in the country. So you can't get money to people, can't get water, can't get electricity, can't get food. They have a referendum to separate from the country. The rest of the Ukraine government says no. They go to conflict, and that's what I'm amazed when people bring up the Ukraine with me and they're talking about the Ukraine. They're like, yeah, but look what's happened. I said, this has been going on. You realize this has been going on since 2014, right?
This was going on for
Yeah.
years and years and years, and then finally Russia comes in. Obviously, there's the other context. NATO continually saying that they're not going to expand east. They're continually expanding east. They're coming closer and closer to Russia's border. Russia could just wait until maybe, from their opinion, it's too late. And NATO has missiles in Ukraine which can reach anywhere in Russia within 6 to 8 minutes without any chance of defense. And NATO has already proven itself as not a defensive organization when it destroyed Libya, one of Africa's richest nations. And after it was destroyed, slavery was reintroduced. It just descended into chaos. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That doesn't need to justify what Russia did to anybody. That doesn't need to justify it. But at least know the context. And if you're still okay with it, if you're still saying, no, you know what, there's no point at all, there's no way to excuse this, that's fine. But these are the kinds of details that are kind of, people even get upset when you mention them.
I want to add to this even more. So I reached out to Patrick. I emailed him, not once. I'm very persistent when I want to get to the bottom of some research that I'm doing. About the fourth time I got a hold of him, he emailed me back. He was in this region. This is all dating back, 6, 7 years ago, something like that. And he responded and said, kind of, who are you? Give me a little bit more information about you, because I'm careful in who I talk to, because my monetization's been shut off on YouTube. And I was like, what's monetization on YouTube? What does that mean? He was probably one of the first independent journalists I saw ever get demonetized on YouTube.
Basically, they're trying to discourage him from continuing.
Sure. So I said, I think your work's amazing. How can I donate to your channel? He says, well, my crowdfunding channel was just closed down. I'm sorry. So I said, how about PayPal? You got PayPal? He says, no, my PayPal's been shut down too. I said, okay.
That's a coordinated effort against him.
Yeah, so PayPal was shut down, GoFundMe was shut down, some other card systems, bank accounts, they all started getting shut down. And then he had a Russian bank account that he had to, sort. I said, you know what? How about I fly out to see you? Let's do this. And he said, okay. We kept chatting with each other. And he says, you know what you could really help me with is just some gear. If you want to donate to my channel, I don't care about the money. Can you maybe buy me a camera or a microphone? And when I met him for the first time, we flew to a country called Moldova. And it was always a little bit of a treat of mine to go down to this region, because in this region, there's another breakaway country. We won't get into too many details in this conversation, but this was another breakaway country, which is almost a blueprint for the Donetsk People's Republic. It's called Transnistria, and it borders between Moldova and the Ukraine. And it's going to be a thorn in NATO's butt, because this one is 600,000 people that are living in a country that has not been recognized, but Moldova wasn't strong enough to kick them out. So they're sandwiched in between Ukraine. They're a 2-hour flight from Paris. They have their own airport there, their own government, their own passport, their own currency. They're ready. And they have their own military, and there's Russian soldiers in there too. Not talked about. But let me add it, I met Patrick. I donated some equipment, and I continue to donate to his channel. But I'm going to make this statement in this conversation, and it's going to be a very bold statement. He has documented almost every single thing that has happened in the Donetsk People's Republic, the DPR, as he calls it, and his wife and his family still live there. He has documented it for 7 years. If there is ever an inquiry or a tribunal on this location, I can guarantee you that all you have to do is go to Patrick Lancaster's entire catalog, which is on display for the entire world right now. If you really, really want to learn the other side, or to become your own researcher, yes, watch the mainstream media's footage, not please do. And you can ask Patrick, and he'll tell you the same thing. People say, yeah, but Patrick, why don't you go to the other side and report on that side? It's very clear why he can't go on that other side, because he knows his life would be finished in a heartbeat. But take the time and go on the other side. Guess what? You're going to have not 20 videos for the last 3 or 4 weeks or 3 months. You're going to have 8 years of well-documented. We're not talking someone just walking up the street saying it's a beautiful day. Oh, no, no, no. He's gone to pretty much every house that he can that's been bombed, every school that's been bombed.
He's talking to all the local people, too.
He's talked to all the local people. He takes time, and his wife works at night to translate this, to put these videos up. We are talking about an archive like I've never seen before.
I really hope he has that backed up, or some other people are
Yes.
helping him back that up, because that's exactly the kind of thing that.
And it's out there for the world to see.
For now.
For now. It's out there for the world to see. And there was something interesting, because some people said to me, he's getting his critics now too, which is normal. Yeah, well, this Patrick Lancaster guy, this and that. You have to wonder why a channel that was dormant is all of a sudden one of the highest trending channels now in this area, and one of the fastest growing. He's grown, I think, 250,000 subscribers in the last month and a half. You could fill up Wembley Stadium 4 or 5 times with the amount of people that have subscribed to his channel.
I mean,
Isn't that a signal that some people want to kind of listen to see what else is going on?
I mean, I get kind of like, I get this feeling in the pit of my stomach every time I think about the kind of content he's doing, because it's
I'm worried.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I mean, he's putting, there's no way that, no matter what donations he gets or anything like that, it is not worth it for the risk that he's putting himself in.
Not doing this for the money.
And I mean, he knows, and people who pay attention, who find a way to find the stuff that's being hidden, knows how brutal the Ukrainian army is. Like, we're talking about prisoners of war being tortured, being chained up and set on fire. I would put the overlays on this video, but the video will probably be taken down. It's pretty disturbing stuff. Shooting tying up Russian soldiers in the legs and the head. They calling the mother of one, telling her what they're about to do to her son. I mean, full-on war crimes.
What you're explaining, Daniel, is, I mean, I became very good friends with him. I've flown to meet him. We've traveled together. If he needs something, he calls me.
Yeah.
If he's not sure of a media outlet that's reached out to them, he gets me to try to research them first to see if it's okay. He should go on camera and talk to them. I'm worried.
Yeah.
And I'm deeply worried about this, because a bomb went off, cratered about 100 meters from his wife's house.
In her hometown.
Not in her hometown, in Russia.
Oh, and where she's gone.
And he thought he was safe to send her there. And you can see it on his channel.
And they lobbed something over very close to his wife's
100
house.
meters. And just before that, the other one, why he moved his wife, was in Donetsk People's Republic. It was 200 meters. Now, this is not him just talking to the cameras.
This
is documented. He will walk out. He will show you this. You are not going to believe the information. And as a content creator now, this is what inspired me to start my channel.
Yeah.
Everybody says, what is Reporterfy Media? Initially, it started out is supporting all these independent media guys. Spotify is a place for musical artists. Reporterfy is for independent reporters.
Yeah.
And I decided it was too big of a challenge to do it, so I decided to say China is going to be what I'm going to focus on.
Yeah, so you're focusing on more positive content right now, travel stuff.
More positive content right now. More try to just let my lens open up to the world and let them know that the cities, and I do some vlogs and cultural stuff. Where Daniel and I really know each other is from you were we'll call it one of the original founders of the Let's Talk China show with us. So we did
that was good, yeah.
The show back then, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but I mean, the stuff is quite amazing. But I like what you were saying about, listen to the mainstream media also, because one of the risks that comes with all of a sudden becoming disillusioned with mainstream media and saying, I'm not going to be gullible anymore, is that some people become equally gullible on the other side.
Yes, true,
all they have to say is something against the U.S. or anti-U.S. or say that, and they'll immediately believe it. That becomes their point of gullibility. Never do that, on either side. Get the story from both sides. I mean, when I was just talking about I don't want people to mistake what I was saying about the brutality of the Ukrainian army as excusing what Russia's doing. That's not necessarily what that's about. You just got to understand the situation. This is the part of the story that's missing. If you think you're defending a democracy, they just banned all the opposition parties, and the only parties that are left are right-wing parties. We've probably got some tweets here we can share, and we can put them up on the screen after too. And they just arrested one of their political opponents. There are two pictures of him, but they're literally posting pictures of this guy, Victor, and Medvedchuk. Is that my pronunciation?
Medvedchuk, yes. Medvedchuk, yeah.
That's the first image they have, and they're literally. And now he looks in way worse condition. He's got a big scar across his forehead, and this is a political opponent. This is what they're doing politically. So don't, You don't say you're defending a democracy, a Western liberal democracy or something like that. That's not what it is. Again, maybe it doesn't change your mind, but at least understand the context. Doesn't mean you won't still support them, but at least understand what you're supporting. Because a lot of these people are looking really silly with the way that they're painting this as black and white. It's not black and white.
Yeah, and we've gone from the cancel culture to the cancel country now.
Yeah.
And it's gone really, really to the point where you were reading a tweet to me a few weeks ago. I think you're kind of telling me about, look at to the extent they're taking this.
The thing that's fascinating for me about this thing is that a lot of people are trained as to what to care about and when to care about it. Yeah. So I don't care if people want to call Putin a war criminal. They're completely, they say that there needs to be consequences and things like that. But as long as it's kind of equal, as long as it's done equally, this isn't the first conflict that's happening. There was conflicts in Ukraine before this. There's disastrous stuff going on in Yemen with the U.S.'s support. On a scale that's far worse, when you look at the picture of these children, but nobody cares about it. So people have to realize that this isn't them all of a sudden waking up by themselves. They're being told what to care about and when to care about it. And from the perspective of somebody that uses this as an opportunity to tell other people about, well, what about this? What about this? And there's a word for that, whataboutism, right? But the problem is that, no, this is really relevant. You are saying that you care about this. Good. All right, good. I want you to remember that. You can either do it two ways. You can say, well, where were you during this time? Or, sure, okay, go after him. But I hope when you're done with this, you're going to go after your own war criminals, and many there are. Caitlin Johnston, once again, she says, condemning Putin is the easiest, most redundant, least courageous thing that anyone in the Western world can do right now. What's a lot harder at the current moment is taking a bold stance against the West's depraved role in getting this war started and keeping it going. Obviously, there's also the context of the conflicts that the West is involved in as well. Okay, so this addresses more the whataboutism directly. It is when somebody brings up bad things the U.S. does in response to outrage over bad things Russia does. It's not to defend Russia, it's to get the U.S. to stop doing bad things. Bleeding whataboutism at sincere attempts to get the U.S. empire to stop doing evil things is just defending those evil things. You're basically just saying, shut up, now's not the time to talk about the bad things the U.S. power alliance does. We're on something else right now. Okay, so when? Nothing has ever been done about the crimes of the empire. No meaningful changes whatsoever were made after Iraq. I actually retweeted that last part of her tweet, and I said, it's particularly important to reflect on when a supposed solution for badly behaved foreign countries is to become more like Western liberal democracies, where there's supposed to be power to hold governments accountable without first ever meaningfully demonstrating this is true. This is such an essential time for people who have always been on the anti-war bandwagon to really push that point, because when this is over, they're going to go back to stop caring. So this brings a lot of people discomfort when they say, well, if these are our values, why don't we stop doing it? How about we hold our government accountable first? It's exactly the time to do it. It's not, but they're trying to paint this as, no, we're not supposed to be talking about this now. But just as Caitlin suggested, well, when?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. To add to that, once again, it's voices like hers that make you as a person, you sit back and you start to think, am I getting the full picture? How do I avoid, getting into that trap where people are so of one mindset that they're so jaded that they can't even listen to the other one. And as content creators, I mean, you know us, we're not doing this for the money, that's for sure. I mean, it costs my channel more to run than Google will ever give me. But it's a message that I want to get out there. And I understand, you know, as a creator, my audience is growing, and I appreciate everybody watching, but I understand that, you know, I'm trying to educate people, to give them the tools that I use now. I've used the tools to meet other content creators like Patrick Lancaster or other content creators like you. When I watch your podcast, I come back from them and I've learned something from them. So it's not about, there's other content creators out there that are more about indoctrinating you instead of educating you. And with me, it's always been a rule that if I'm going to be talking about a place or covering a place, I'm in the place.
Right.
I'm not going to sit at home. I'm not going to, and you'll find me that when I was in Thailand, a lot of the content I was putting out with China was a lot of aerial stuff. Now I came to vlogs. Everyone says, why aren't you vlogging in Thailand? Well, I want to focus on China. I want to see what's going on in China, but I'm not really going to release that stuff until these feet are on the ground.
Right.
I'm in here, I'm on the ground, I'm reporting it, and you know, there is one thing about, can you give accuracy? And maybe you can, but can you give accuracy being so far away from a place and using the media, the regular media, for that content? And for me, no. You'll see that most of the stuff on my channel, I'm not trying to plug it, sorry, but most of the stuff on my channel is either me getting the footage, finding the footage, hiring someone to get the footage. It's costly, but putting it together to give a balanced story. I've done videos on pollution in China. I've done it on the Belt Road Initiative on China. I've done it on, there's a massive report in the mainstream media about ghost towns, massive ghost towns. Well, I got a crew to go out there on my dime to go gather that information, came back, did a report on it. So it's that kind of stuff where I'm more educating, I'm not indoctrinating. I want my viewers to come back and decide what they want to do. And it's funny, most of if I ever get criticism on my videos, I will not delete that. I will actually take that comment and put it to the top of the video so that people can have an open discussion about it and to try to talk about, you know.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a time that's, I mean, the challenge now, though, is with what YouTube and Facebook and all these places are doing, is you get to a certain point and then your channel becomes at risk for being totally removed. You know, Pepe Escobar was removed from Twitter. These are really important voices that are in the other direction. You don't necessarily have to believe them.
Some people are being labeled as Russian media, Mr. Galloway.
So we have a few things. Yeah, so RT is being banned across Europe. They're being censored off of YouTube. And we have, so Radio Free Amanda had said, we have to shut down RT America because it's Russian propaganda. Meanwhile, the White House is briefing TikTok influencers on how to cover Ukraine. Now, this one's particularly interesting.
I remember this one, yeah.
Because it's always like the New York Times and Al Jazeera, they're always coming after me. Yeah, they're coming after me like, oh, how are you influenced by the Chinese government?
AP, Associated Press.
I'm not, like,
Times.
these are my views. I don't work for anybody. And here you have it right in front of their faces, you know, but these guys aren't going to get attacked as much as, you know, and even when they write about it in a positive way. It's like, oh, yeah, this is really good. It's an educational session.
You know what, funny that you're saying that, you know, when they take the attacks. I made a video on an island in Sanya. You know, Hainan Island.
Yep.
And I got contacted by the Associated Press. You know, did Evergrande fund you to make this? And if there's something that I could put out to the media there, and to the journalists, the educated journalists and the approved journalists, whether they're working for their government organizations, you are putting content creators' lives at risk.
I would say at bare minimum, it's livelihoods. If I was in the West, if these outlets were writing about me, oh, he's, you know, Chinese government connected or whatever, I mean, that would seriously affect my ability to operate or to get a job or to do business in the West. If I actually cared about that or I relied on doing that, and in some ways I do, so it does have an impact. These are the mechanisms that silence people. And whatever, if you want to say, well, we're just doing journalism, at least do it honestly. With what CBC did to me was they deliberately cut out 3.5 seconds from a half-an-hour interview to make it look like I was admitting that I was part of this campaign they were doing. They said they wrote a correction about after on their website, but the damage is done.
Yeah.
And they're still selling that clip through news aggregators to other news outlets, and it's showing up elsewhere. And they said, "Oh, this correction will show up everywhere." No, it doesn't show up everywhere. They're still selling,
But yeah, you're right on that.
Yeah.
And there's on the flip side, there's channels that are built on hate and racism, and I think that eventually in time, channels like that are fueled, whether it's for financial gain or whether it's for whatever, they always make a mistake. And eventually they get deplatformed.
Honing in on going back to the media stuff, I'll read a few other tweets that are really interesting and relevant to that. So Richard Medhurst says, the West doesn't need state media. It has corporations that own both the state and the media, much more potent and dangerous. Which is quite interesting when you think about it. It's all wrapped up together. And a lot of these conflicts are corporately driven. I remember Julian Assange, before he was arrested, talking about how, the war in Afghanistan, nobody needs to win the war in Afghanistan per se. They could continue going and going and going, but the arms manufacturers win. They're continually washing public money into the arms of these multinational arms manufacturers, who in turn sponsor, senators and stuff like that. They donate to the senators. It's the most scary, ridiculous conflict of interest ever, which has obvious consequences to war. Caitlin Johnston again once says, RT has been banned by U.S. allies, Australia, Germany, and Poland, and the political media class is calling for its total obliteration. When really all you'd have to do to kill RT is simply allow leftists and anti-war opinions on Western mass media. You'd steal their entire audience. So, this is a good point, because it's not a matter of just getting rid of RT. It's about deplatforming people like Patrick Lantat, or demonetizing him and outright removing other people. I'll just go through a few more here. Andy Borum, our friend in Shanghai. Russia media is banned as propaganda, but Ukraine's fake news is okay because it's important myth-making that builds morale. And that was retweeting a New York Times story talking about the viral stories of the various fake stories, and saying that, but it's a part of Ukraine's plan, and it's a good thing to keep morale high. So it's not a matter of banning disinformation. It's about, obviously, it's narrative control. One final one before we talk about this a little bit more. Jackson Hinkle says, YouTube would have banned people who questioned WMD in Iraq in the lead up to the U.S. invasion. Yeah. I mean, it's so true. That's exactly what would have happened. Yeah. And that's the danger with what they're doing. But it's not only online also. There was a story of a 65-year-old substitute teacher and journalist who was suspended from teaching in Arlington for giving his students a balanced perspective on the Russian-Ukraine conflict. Yeah. And I read what his statement was. It was really quite tame. But this is when stuff like you're talking about, stuff that you do, you're not necessarily putting it on your channel right now, but going out there and listening to these kinds of people becomes way more important.
Yeah, of course. And the other thing is that right now, I'm not putting it on my channel, but I know guys like Patrick that I reach out to other content creators and say, listen, this fits the content to your channel. Do you want to talk to this guy? He will give your audience another side to listen to. And that's how I can be helpful. I want to add to that, your tweets that you're reading. I remember watching an Australian program where a student came up and they kicked him off the show because he had an opinion. I'm not sure if you saw that.
I saw that.
They asked him to leave the show. Now, what I would probably do in that situation as a content creator is I'd find out who that young man was that was asked to leave the show and get him on the show so he can talk.
All right.
Silencing people. Shutting people down and not giving them the opportunity to at least give their opinion or their experience or their, how do we know that young man that was on the show maybe had best friends that lived in the Donetsk People's Republic? Because what he was telling, and I agree with you, Daniel, that, we're not condoning what's happened down in that region at all. But for God's sakes, please allow the people, the viewers, most viewers, can pretty much come up with their own opinion if they are given a fair way to do it. And right now it's unfortunate.
I mean, ordinary Russians, you imagine what it must be like for a Russian who lives overseas who has a different perspective. And like that guy on the show, they don't even want to hear from them. They want to kick them off of their shows. They don't want to say, well, why does this guy have a different perspective? So that's for Russians who are sympathetic towards Russia's position. Russians who just want to be Russians without anything political in the West are targeted too. You have like football players who are demanded to condemn Putin. You had the conductor in
Paralympic
the Netherlands
that were asked to leave for Russia.
Yeah, the conductor was given 24 hours to condemn Putin or lose his job, and he lost his job. Cats, for goodness sake, cats that were born in Russia were
and don't forget, if you're Belarusian too, they're going to throw you on there under the bus as well.
Yeah, but the cats they were born in Russia, you couldn't be added to this registry, this cat registry anymore. Wow. I just watched something this morning, which was what's the Tonight Show? Trevor Noah, or whatever it's called. He was making fun of Russian TikTokers, Russian influencers, who were angry that Chanel was refusing to sell bags to Russians overseas, or they had to promise that they weren't going to take it back to Russia. And so some Russian influencers were angry about that, and they started cutting up their bags. Might not be the best thing to do, but he was making fun of them, saying, oh, that's really high on my list, Russian influencers. No, that's a really big issue. Racism, racially targeting people, and saying, no, you can't come in my shop. You can't buy my product because I'm Russian. This is like, we're going back in the past. Like, how can people not know that this kind of stuff is wrong?
Yeah.
You had people saying that, we should take Russian property away from ordinary Russians or kick them out of our schools and things like that. I mean, they are literally becoming the exact thing that they're pretending to stand against, or that they pretended to grow past.
It's truly amazing what's happened. I mean, now my mother, 77 years old, has saying to me, son, watching your friends, watching all your other friends, because it's quite vast as a community. All of our channels grow, our audience get bigger, and now most of the responsibility to try to show some balance in the world falls on content creators that are just doing it to try to be helpful. Yet when we try to do that and use what hours we have left in the week outside of our wives and families and kids, we've bared this responsibility in some way. And what does it bring us? Well, it brings us a wall of a very scary wall of a side of media I've never seen.
Yeah, I mean, it's having individual haters that comes with the territory. But it has been really interesting to see the media come after people, and not wanting to say, okay, these guys have a different opinion. And I said that to CBC in the interview too. I said, you know what? When you go to somebody who has all of the correct negative opinions about China, you engage with them on their ideas honestly. You say, okay, can you expand on this a bit? When you engage with somebody who says anything different from the mainstream media narrative, it's, why are you saying this? Who's influencing you? Where is your funding coming from? That's all they care about at that point. I mean, it's really remarkable. But the information war, trying to control this is, there were a few tweets also. There was one I don't have here in front of me, but it was by NATO. They posted
I think I remember that
the Women's Day one, and it had these Ukrainian soldiers with the Nazi insignia on the thing.
Unbelievable.
And they had to removed it after. There was this one, which was from the Ukraine military.
Yeah, I remember.
Where they said, 22 days, 1,100 missiles were bombed on Ukraine, and in 5 years in Syria there were only 100 missiles. I mean, the U.S. alone, launched 1,000 in one day in Syria. They've killed countless civilians in Syria. I think Raqqa was the city where they had 1,000 casualties from NATO-led bombardments. But they had to delete this too because they just got completely destroyed. They're trying to create an alternate reality. And they're playing with the limits here. Sometimes they go a bit too far, saying, okay, this one was a bit too obvious, and they're getting rid of it. But I know your crew here needs the camera soon too, though. But we'll finish maybe on a few thoughts on the, I thought this was good too in terms of trying to explain the hypocrisy and getting away from this thing where people think it's just about whataboutism, it's just about deflecting. Because for me, if they go after Putin and they convict him as a war criminal, they think really that's what's supposed to happen. I just really hope that we apply this equally, because then it's not about international law. It's just about using it as a tool to punish geopolitical enemies. So with this one, this is David McBride. He was a He was a British military officer and a military lawyer for the Australian military, and he was charged, and they went after him because he released information about the brutal crimes that Australians committed in Afghanistan. But anyways, he said on Twitter, "I've been asked if I think the invasion of Ukraine is illegal. My answer is, if we don't hold our own leaders to account, we can't hold other leaders to account. If the law is not applied consistently, it is not the law. It is simply an excuse we use to target our enemies," what I was just kind of getting at earlier. "We will pay a heavy price for our hubris of 2003 in the future. We didn't just fail to punish Bush and Blair. We rewarded them. We re-elected them. We knighted them. If you want to see Putin in his true light, imagine him landing a jet and then saying, 'Mission accomplished,' like Bush did on that." Yeah. "The justifications for the invasion of both Iraq and Ukraine are very similar. They were hurting their own people. They have bad stuff that could harm us. We warned them to stop, or else. We had no choice but to step in and to defend ourselves. The Russians didn't blackmail the UN." You almost get the sense in the last thing that he kind of agrees with the anti-Russian narrative in some aspects, but he's going to refuse to be ashamed into having to criticize them at every corner, because it's like, no, you know, actually you guys are the ones who are supposed to prove that this is something you really care about. You can't just all of a sudden turn on your care button for this when it was never on before, and it's going to turn off again. So it's almost like for these people, it's important that you don't fold and give in to all these people who come to you one by one and say, "I need to hear you condemn Putin." No. But while I have your attention and you're suffering because you're so desperate to hear me say those words, let me tell you a few things.
Right.
And that's why a lot of these global south countries, too, who are being forced to take a position, are saying, what? When the Iraq invasion was going on, when all this was going on, when you were bombing Libya, none of your geopolitical rivals, China or Russia, wasn't coming to us saying, I must hear you condemn America. Going around witch hunting everybody to say you have to condemn what America does. Why all of a sudden is this a new obligation? And it came with real consequences. Also, Lithuania refused to ship the 500,000 donated vaccines to Bangladesh when they refused to condemn Putin. I mean, it's an amazing opportunity to understand this double standard that happens across the media and within people themselves. Because I bet you a lot of these people don't realize what's happening to them. I bet you a lot of these people really think, no, I really do care about this.
Yeah.
And they've underestimated the extent, once again, that they're being controlled by the fact that they're being told what to care about and when to care about it.
Very true. And, you know, I'm going to add to that, I'm going to add some context to it that, you know, in this community that I've been working with, meeting yourself and many other content creators, I've taken great pride on putting a lot of nice content out with you guys over the last few years. I am working with a team of people in the background that are going to be able to stand up and defend us from quite a rigorous point that if we continue to take these hits, we continue to take these unfounded allegations or this context of defaming our good characters or stuff like that, they're going to have to be ready eventually here in the future.
You know, for me though, I gotta say though, for me, the thing that makes me angry about the CBC piece, for example, is not that they did that to me. I actually, personally, I'm actually grateful that I got to experience that from the inside, because I got to show my audience, this is exactly what I've been telling you guys about. And I've experienced it from the inside. I have the evidence of the entire interview that I can tell you this is exactly what they did. I appreciate that, but
I remember we spoke about before that was going
on.
I kept saying, Daniel, have one camera record this. Daniel, please
exactly.
Record that. And you're like, I got that record. I got that record.
Right. But I want to say,
because you knew it was going to happen.
But I want to say, the thing that I'm angry about is that they do this to other people who actually do care about it, who it actually does affect their livelihoods, who are going to have a hard time operating in the West because of how they were slandered by these outlets. I don't care. I can take the hit. But this is how they're controlling the narrative. I knew I was going to be cut out of context. I thought that I would either be cut completely or I'd be cut out of context. But I didn't realize how spectacularly they were going to do it.
It shows you that they've managed to even take 3.5 seconds. So they must have been thinking, no, we couldn't get him on this,
I made it hard.
That.
I made it hard. Yeah.
So they only could get 3.5 seconds. I thought it was cute. And I watched it in amazement too. I said, oh, come on, really?
Yeah, I think my dad watched it live, and he was just like, I can't believe. Well, he says I can't believe, but really he knew that's exactly what's going to happen.
Dan, really thank you for interviewing me. What a pleasure it is. I've always watched your programs, and you know, even some of the narration I do on some of my videos is taken from the way that you research, and I really admire what you do.
Oh, thank you. I mean, that means a lot. You're putting out some good videos too.
Thank you.
And but we're gonna have more chats. I'll be out here more with some of this other stuff I'm doing, and we'll get together again.
Yeah, terrific.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Take care. See you next time, guys.